As we're fond of bringing up, the shameless plundering of blockbuster franchises in the service of shitty, flagrantly offensive ripoffs is big business. Such thievery is lazy as hell in and of itself, but it's been demonstrated that you can barely even try to make a movie and still somehow make one. We're looking at you, the amazing bulk. Although the age of the mockbuster began with the founding of cheap crap merchants, The Asylum in 1997, its beginnings go back to the beginning of the blockbuster itself. And while the first summer blockbuster spawned its own legion of imitators, which could and very well might spawn its own video, it was the second one that really got the ball rolling. So today, we're going over 8 embarrassingly shitty Star Wars ripoffs.
H.G. Wells's The Shape of Things to Come. Famed science fiction author H.G. Wells wrote The Shape of Things to Come, a seminal work of speculative fiction, in 1933. Among the novel's predictions were the Second World War, which happened, and the formation of one world government, which is not yet so far as we know. When the Canadian film H.G. Wells's The Shape of Things to Come was released in 1979, Mr. Wells's, dead since 1946, rose out of his grave and furiously denounced his implied involvement with this low-budget piece of trash, which bore literally no resemblance to his novel. Well, no, he didn't, but nobody would have been surprised. While the novel deals largely with political machinations, wars, and the suppressions of religions, the so-called adaptation deals much more with moon bases, starships, holograms, and cute little robots named Sparks. With recycled props, a nonsensical plot, and some kind of disco ball-looking weapon, the film is a surreal experience even before the great Jack Palance shows up to sleepwalk his way through a thankless role. Critics absolutely savaged the film, which bombed in theaters but went on to have a bit of a second life. Early subscribers to pay cable channels like HBO found out quickly that there was a lot of space to fill in between the hit movies you were paying for, and The Shape of Things to Come showed up regularly on them throughout the early 80s.
Star Odyssey, 1979. You could probably go ahead and think of the Italian director Alfonso Brescia as the villain of this entire video. Before becoming one of the OG blockbuster ripoff artists, he was responsible for cranking out direct like 1967's Killer Caliber 32, and 1972's Naked Girl Killed in the Park. No, really, look, there's an IMDb page for it and everything. We couldn't make that up. At any rate, Brescia in 1978 unleashed not one, but 4 low-budget sci-fi baskets of crap, intended to capitalize on the success of Star Wars. All Italian productions with Italian cast and crew, they are Cosmos, War of the Planets, Battle in Interstellar Space, you may see a theme developing here, War of the Robots, and Star Odyssey, which strangely does not feature a reference to war or battles in its title, yet it is the most well-known of the 4. Okay, so the plot has an evil dictator taking over the Earth, opposed by a professor and his robot friends, and it honestly just doesn't even matter. Look at this poster. A guy with a laser sword, a golden robot, a huge-ass spaceship, a sluttier princess. Italian moviegoers knew what they were getting themselves into, and they paid to see this anyways.
Message from Space. It didn't take long for Japan to jump on this bandwagon, because of course it didn't. 1978's Message from Space sported a $6 million budget that made it the most expensive film produced in Japan up to that time, which had surprised no one who has ever seen a single Godzilla movie, and actually starred respected American actor Vic Morrow and martial arts star Sonny Chiba. The film even received an American release after being purchased for $1 million by United Artists, which was sold in 1980 due to a series of bad moves, just like that one. The film took all the familiar elements and japanned them up with a hilariously convoluted plot and amateurish special effects. Its slavish devotion to aping Star Wars' visual style was exceeded only by its complete ineptness in doing so, and if Japanese critics were harsh, American critics were merciless. The New York Times proclaimed it so terrible it has a certain comic integrity, which is probably not what the filmmakers were going for, and the Los Angeles Times' critic reported that the audience at his showing literally laughed it off the screen. Unfortunately, it was near the end of an otherwise distinguished career for Morrow, who redeemed himself with a spectacular performance in 1983's Twilight Zone the movie, during the filming of which he was famously killed in an on-set accident.
Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin. The 1985 animated film Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin has the distinction of being super late to more than one party. An obvious Star Wars cash-in billed as, quote-unquote, the best 3D movie ever made. It was released 2 years after the end of the Star Wars trilogy and the peak of the 1980s 3D revival. Also, it was nowhere near the best 3D movie ever made. The plot adds a dash of King Arthur by having its protagonist begin his journey by discovering a jeweled sword, then goes on to introduce its own thinly disguised versions of the Jedi Knights, Darth Vader, the Stormtroopers, and pretty much every other plot element of the original film. It actually played in theaters for over 2 weeks, but failed to make back even a quarter of its $15 million budget. While the film is generally considered to be among the first to blend elements of computer animated imagery with traditional animation, it is also generally considered to be terrible, a waste of time and effort by everyone involved, and $15 million thrown to the winds in that order.
Star Crash. Luigi Cozzi may have the most respectable pedigree of the Italian actors on our list, having worked as a cinematographer and co-screenwriter for Dario Argento on many of his best-known works. But left to his own devices, Cozzi immediately showed his schlock-peddling tendencies, working on low-budget genre fare like Hercules with Lou Ferrigno and the unfortunate genre starter Monster Shark throughout the 80s. But he really got started with 1978's Star Crash, which starred Scream and Jiggle Queen Caroline Munro, a pre-Knight Rider David Hasselhoff, and the legendary actor Christopher Plummer, slumming it ultra hard. Smuggler Stella Star takes on the evil Count Zarth Arn, with a final battle between two space fleets involving a giant space station. And if all this sounds like fanfiction written by a third grader while suffering a high fever, just think of the acute shame Plummer must have felt after saying yes to the script. Released only 18 months after Star Wars, the film was once again pounded by critics. Even its original distributor, American International, declined to release it after seeing the final cut, leaving that shame to New World Pictures, which was fittingly founded by B-movie king Roger Corman.
Battle Beyond the Stars. Speaking of New World and Corman, 1980's Battle Beyond the Stars was a Corman-produced, New World-released film that must have had the most talent involved of any film on this list. On paper, it sounds like it should have been great. Its stars included Robert Vaughn, a pre-A-Team George Peppard, John Saxon, a featured player in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and, well, Penthouse Pants Sybil Danning. As we have previously noted, she was talented in her own way. The script was penned by veteran screenwriter John Sayles, and the special effects were designed by a very young James Cameron. The score was only the second composed by James Horner, who would go on to win an Academy Award for his work on Titanic. It was the most expensive film Corman had made to the time, but those familiar with Corman will know that that doesn't mean much. You can find all of the usual elements in the plot: androids, an evil overlord, and a space cowboy who was literally named Space Cowboy, played by Peppard. The film's low-budget and derivative plot and characters earned it demerits in the eyes of critics, but the actors gave it their all, and Cameron's effects and Horner's score was generally praised. The film was a moderate financial success, and Roger Corman learned. We will catch up to him in just a bit.
The Man Who Saved the World, 1982. From a somewhat respectable production by a man who at least knew what he was doing, we segue to 1982's The Man Who Saved the World. It's known by a couple of other titles, but it's most commonly referred to as Turkish Star Wars, because that is all it ever wanted to be. In telling its story of space guys who crash on a desert planet and become gladiators or something, the film rips off actual footage from Star Wars. Lots of it. The desert planet uses shots of Tatooine, the entire Mos Eisley Cantina sequence is essentially jacked like a Puff Daddy song, an evil wizard's shield of concentrated brain molecules is just a shot of the Death Star. It goes on, also incorporating unrelated footage like newsreel clips and documentaries of the American space program. The soundtrack is lifted from a dozen popular movies, with the main theme from Raiders of the Lost Ark featuring prominently. And even the actors appear to have lifted their acting styles from people who have never acted, seen a movie, or heard the word act. This insane mishmash of jaw-droppingly amateurish and flat-out pilfered has earned The Man Who Saved the World a place in the discussion of the worst films ever made, and of course, a cult following.
Space Raiders, 1983. And now we're back to Roger Corman, who never made a highly questionable creative choice he didn't like. New World's 1983 film Space Raiders goes above and beyond the average ripoff of Star Wars by blatantly ripping off a previous ripoff, the previously mentioned Battle Beyond the Stars. figuring that he could replicate the film's modest success by rearranging its parts and slapping them together with Elmer's glue. Corman enlisted a hapless studio director and a no-name cast to plot through yet another rehashing of Star Wars' plots, while using as few original, non-recycled elements as possible. Seriously, the sets were all reused after doing time in previous New World productions, and all of James Cameron's special effects and James Horner's score, again the most praised aspects of Battle Beyond the Stars, were crammed in as well. Space Raiders has mostly been deservedly forgotten, but it marks a low point in an era when unscrupulous filmmakers first began learning to cash in on the hottest properties. Not that any of these films took money out of the pockets of George Lucas.
Goddamn rocks. I hate rocks.
But you can basically draw a line from films like these to the success of The Asylum, and from there to the existence of shit like Sharknado 4. And, well, for that, they deserve our wholehearted mockery.
Watch the rocks for me, will you?